Shohei ran away. Those 3 words did not come from an anonymous comment section. They did not come from a frustrated fan venting into the void. They came from inside the American sports media establishment. From voices that carry weight. From platforms that reach millions. And when those words landed, they did not land quietly. They landed like an accusation. The moment Shohei Ohtani's withdrawal from the All-Star game was confirmed, something shifted in the tone of American baseball coverage. It was not subtle. It was not polite. Within hours, the narrative had been written, and the narrative was not kind. The word that kept appearing, in headlines and on television panels and across radio broadcasts, was the same word. The same uncomfortable, loaded, unfair word. Coward. To understand why that word appeared so quickly, you have to understand what the All-Star Game means inside American sports culture. It is not simply an exhibition. It is not simply a mid-season celebration. It is a referendum. A public vote on who matters. On who belongs at the center of the sport. And when a player who received the most votes, who was selected as the face of the event, who had the entire marketing apparatus of Major League Baseball positioned around his name and his image, when that player withdraws, the American sports media does not simply report the absence. It assigns meaning to it. The meaning they assigned to Ohtani's absence was not charitable. One television analyst, speaking on a national broadcast, did not pause before delivering his verdict. He said Ohtani had been given everything. The votes. The platform. The spotlight. And when the moment came to step into that spotlight and accept what the fans had given him, he stepped away instead. He called it a pattern. He said the biggest stages seemed to produce the same result with Ohtani. A reason. An explanation. An exit. He said, Shohei ran away. The studio went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then the conversation continued, and the dam had broken, and what followed in the hours and days after that moment was a flood. The legends were not silent either. That was the part that made this story heavier than a simple media controversy. When former players speak, when men who wore the uniform and stood on those fields and played in those games under that pressure speak, their words carry a different kind of authority. They are not analysts reading a script. They are not commentators filling airtime. They are men who know what it costs to show up, and who have very specific feelings about what it means when someone chooses not to. One Hall of Famer, a man whose name is attached to some of the most celebrated performances in All-Star history, said he did not understand the decision. He said when he was playing, the All-Star game was something you protected. Something you fought to get to and fought to stay in. He said the fans gave you that selection and you honored it with your presence. He said he could not remember a time when a player received the most votes in the entire league and then withdrew from the game those votes were for. He stopped short of using the word coward. But the word was in the room. Another former player, a man who represented his league in multiple All-Star games despite playing through injuries that would have ended careers of lesser competitors, was more direct. He said the culture had changed. He said there was a time when playing through discomfort was not celebrated, it was simply expected. He said the message being sent by this withdrawal, intentional or not, was a message about priorities. And the priorities, he said, did not sit well with him. The room where he said this was not quiet afterward. It was loud. But there was another room. On the other side of the coverage, on the other side of the ocean, in a different language and a different sports culture with a different set of values entirely, the reaction was something else. In Japan, the response to the American media's characterization of Ohtani's withdrawal was not confusion. It was anger. Not the explosive, performative anger of a sports debate panel. Something quieter and therefore more serious. The kind of anger that lives in a single sentence written with complete composure. They do not understand him, one Japanese commentator wrote. They have never understood him. The argument from the Japanese side was not simply defensive. It was substantive. It began with the fact that the American coverage had largely set aside. Ohtani had already returned to pitching in May. He had already thrown 5 innings against the Padres in a game that carried genuine postseason implications. He had already demonstrated, on a stage that required everything, that he was healthy enough and focused enough and prepared enough to compete at the highest level. The All-Star game was not the test of that. It was the decoration around it. Japanese baseball culture has a concept that does not translate perfectly into English but that informed every defense of Ohtani that emerged in those days. It is the idea that the truest form of respect you can show your team, your sport, and yourself is to be ready when it matters most. Not to be visible when the cameras are on. Not to perform on schedule for the benefit of sponsors and broadcasters. But to protect your body and your preparation and your edge so that when the real moment arrives, you are fully present for it. By that standard, Ohtani had not run away. He had made a calculation. A serious, considered, professionally responsible calculation about what his body needed and what October demanded and where the line was between honoring the fans who voted for him and protecting the team that depended on him. The American media had looked at that calculation and called it cowardice. The Japanese response was to look at the American media and question whether they understood the calculation at all. The gap between those two positions was not simply cultural. It was also historical. Ohtani has spent his entire career in America existing slightly outside the categories the American sports media uses to organize its understanding of athletes. He does not fit the template of the superstar who chases individual glory. He does not give the kind of interviews that generate headlines. He does not perform his greatness for the cameras in the way that American sports culture has decided greatness should be performed. He shows up, prepares with an intensity that teammates describe as almost intimidating, and then does things on the field that no one has seen before. The American sports media has never been entirely comfortable with that. Not because they don't recognize his talent. They do. But because he refuses to be legible to them on their terms. He speaks through an interpreter. He deflects personal questions with the patience of someone who has decided, long ago, that the questions do not interest him. He gives you the baseball and almost nothing else. That restraint, that deliberate withholding of the personal narrative that American sports media runs on, has always created a low-level friction. And when the All-Star withdrawal happened, that friction suddenly had a target. One prominent American columnist wrote a piece that did not attack Ohtani's ability or his statistics. It attacked his relationship to American baseball. It said that Ohtani had accepted the money, accepted the votes, accepted the marketing campaigns and the billboard space and the Dodgers uniform and everything that American baseball had given him, and that the All-Star game was the moment when he was supposed to give something back. And he had not. The piece was widely shared. It was also widely criticized. But the criticism came mostly from outside American sports media. From Japanese voices. From statistical analysts. From people who had watched Ohtani pitch 5 innings in May and could not reconcile what they had seen with the portrait of a player who avoided pressure. Dave Roberts did not say much publicly about the criticism. He rarely does. He is a manager who protects his players with the same consistency with which he deploys them, and on this question his position was the same as it had been since the withdrawal was announced. The decision was right. The timing was right. October was the target. But in a brief comment, in the margins of a press availability that was supposed to be about something else entirely, he said one thing that stayed in the room after he left it. He said that Ohtani had not wanted to withdraw. He said the conversation had been difficult. He said Ohtani had pushed back, had argued that he could manage it, had wanted to be there. The medical staff had been firm. When Roberts said that, the shape of the story changed slightly. Because the image of Ohtani pushing to play, arguing to be on that field, being told by the people responsible for his health that it was not the right decision, that image did not fit the word that had been circulating in the American coverage. Coward is a word for someone who does not want to be there. It is not a word for someone who had to be held back. The overseas reactions kept coming. From Latin America, where Ohtani has a significant following, the response was largely sympathetic. Several former players from Dominican and Venezuelan baseball traditions, cultures with their own complicated relationship to playing through injury, said they understood the decision even if they would have made a different one. They separated the choice from the character. They said a man can be brave and still make a conservative decision about his body. They said those two things are not contradictory. From Korea, where Ohtani is watched with an intensity that mirrors Japan's, the reaction was similar. The dominant sentiment was not anger at the withdrawal. It was anger at the coverage. At the American media's willingness to reach for the harshest possible interpretation of a decision made by the most carefully managed athlete in the sport. One Korean sports commentator put it simply. He said, "They are criticizing him for protecting the thing that makes him worth criticizing." The All-Star game came and went. The stadium filled. The players performed. The broadcast ran its scheduled hours. In the spaces where Ohtani's name would have been, other names filled in. The game was played, as it always is, and it will be remembered, as it always is, for a few specific moments that the cameras happened to catch. But in boardrooms and newsrooms and living rooms across 2 continents, the conversation that had begun with those 3 words, "Shohei ran away," did not end with the final out. It shifted, the way important conversations shift, from the original accusation to the question underneath it. Not whether Ohtani should have played. Not whether the withdrawal was medically justified. But something harder and more revealing. Why does it feel so personal when he is absent? The answer to that question is the one nobody on the American panel shows wanted to say out loud. Because it would require admitting something uncomfortable. That the anger is not really about the All-Star game. It is about dependency. About how much American baseball, its media, its sponsors, its entire summer attention economy, has come to depend on one man who was born in Oshu, Japan, and who has never once suggested that dependency was his problem to manage. He did not run away. He simply reminded everyone how far they had run toward him.